Hello and welcome to our breakout session today on Request to Pay, the Request to Pay revolution. I'm going to just introduce our speakers briefly in a moment and then talk a little bit about Request to Pay before we get into the questions. So my name is Dave Patrick. I'm a principal here with Payments Canada on the payment products team, and I'll be your panel moderator today. I'm joined by Katrina Stewart from the New Payments Platform in Australia, Dan Dickinson from Equitable Bank here in Canada, and Simon Brooks from Pay.uk. As I mentioned, I will introduce our speakers, or ask our speakers to introduce themselves in just a moment. But before we do, let's get a good sense of what Request to Pay is. Request to Pay is a secure messaging service that complements existing payments infrastructure in a flexible way for businesses and consumers to settle their payments. How does it work? Request to Pay will allow any business or individual wishing to receive a payment to send an electronic request for that payment to the payer's account. The request will be received by the payer, most likely by an electronic interface such as a mobile banking application, and will show the requested amount and the due date. Depending on how Request to Pay has been implemented, they will then be presented with a number of choices, such as paying in full, paying in part, asking for an extension, declining the payment, or may even be able to send a message back to the individual that sent the request in the first place. If payer chooses to make a payment, the payee will be notified whether the payment is in full, in part, and when it has been confirmed. Why does real-time payments or faster payments need Request to Pay? Well, as we all know, the payments industry is evolving to meet the changing needs and requirements of the modern consumer and businesses. Request to Pay offers businesses and consumers more control of their outgoing payments. It also enhances the control and visibility they have over their cash flow. It has the potential to dramatically change the way we pay and are paid. And now I'd like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. Maybe they could take 2 or 3 minutes to give us their name, their role, the organization that they work for, and a brief description so far of their work on Request to Pay. Katrina, I'd like to start with you.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. So my name is Katrina Stewart. I'm responsible for engagement at New Payments Platform here in Australia. We are very busy implementing our version of Request to Pay, which we have just branded to the market as Pay2. And that's been a multi-year program that's due to go live later on next year in 2022.
Terrific. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Dan Dickinson. I am the CIO at Equitable Bank in Toronto. You might know us better as EQ Bank if you're a customer. And the company, for those of you who don't know, it's the 9th largest Schedule I bank in Canada. We have just over 200,000 customers now and a few billion in deposits under the EQ Bank name and platform. So I joined 7 years ago to start EQ Bank and now run technology. I think my experience with Request to Pay on this panel is going to be somewhat less than the other two. We're in a very different state in Canada, as you know, probably everyone watching this knows. So my involvement with this was a little bit more, I guess, at the planning level. So I spent 3 years on the board at Payments Canada and I've worked on various committees. And now I'm thinking very much about what it means to me as more of a user than in a governance capacity.
Great. Thanks, Dan. And Simon?
Yes, thanks, Dave, and thanks for the opportunity to speak here. I'm Simon Brooks. I work for Pay.uk here in the UK. I'm responsible for delivering Request to Pay here in the UK. My background in Request to Pay is I've been working on the UK solution for the last 5.5 years, and we actually launched the framework for Request to Pay here in the UK in May last year. So we're coming up to our first birthday. We're making progress. I know we're going to talk about the ups and the downs of Request to Pay and how we see Request to Pay developing, not only here in the UK, but around the world, as you have people from Canada and Australia. But I can say I've talked to almost every continent on the planet in respect of Request to Pay. I would personally say, and most people would say to me, well, you would say that, wouldn't you, given my involvement here in the UK? But I would say I think it's the next big thing in payments, and also from the bill side of things. And I know we're also going to talk about real-time payments, and I was heavily involved in my previous life as a member of HSBC Bank for 32 years in delivering faster payments again here in the UK, and flying the flag for Great Britain. We were the first to launch a real-time payment system anywhere in the world, and other countries can claim they had it, but I'll tell you, you're wrong. We were the first. So a bit of jingoism, I know, but you asked me to fill 3 minutes, so I'm giving it a go. So there you go. Back to you, Dave.
That's terrific, Simon. Thanks so much. And thank you all for being here today. I know that you're either staying up late or getting up early or maybe finishing your day. So thank you so much. Dan, the first question is actually going to be to you. How has real-time payments or faster payments changed in the last 5 years in Canada? And what do you predict is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
I'd say, I'd like to say more has sort of actually changed in the last 5 years. I know there's been a ton of work that's been going on, and I've, as I said, had a couple of different vantage points on that work. So there's been an enormous amount of work going into the planning phase and the, now execution. We're getting really close to some of the components of the payments modernization work, which is really exciting. I think, the big thing for myself, as we start to think about the emergence of the real-time rail, all the opportunities that opens up. So, I won't rehash the whole, I'm certainly not qualified to rehash the whole PayMod roadmap and discussions that have happened to date anyway. And as I said, most of the people on this call will be more informed about it than I. But I think from my perspective, it's really been now trying to really get under the covers of what the RTR is going to mean for us, and what opportunities that opens up, one of which could be a request to pay, although, perhaps not in the timeline that I would have liked. So that maybe I'll save that for a few minutes later. But I do think that's really the story in Canada, is the potential, the discussion, all the work that's gone into building the foundation for all that opportunity and potential, and the question now becomes sequencing and timing, and when do we get to the really fun stuff, right?
It's a great perspective, given your role on the board, Dan, and how we've been planning so far, and the plans to get RTR live here in Canada. Simon, I'd like to hear from your perspective as well in terms of where what has changed in the last 5 years, and where is real-time payments going in your market?
So as I said, we launched faster payments here in the UK, which is our equivalent of real-time payments, back in 2008. So we've been at it for nearly 12 years now, or just over 12 years, and the changes that we've seen have been massive. We originally launched it and thought it was going to be peer-to-peer, P2P, but actually that has changed. We're now seeing it used for a whole load of different use cases that we never imagined when we first launched it. And the increase of mobile banking has seen a huge shift in the usage of real-time payments and the way people use them. I think the real key one for me to say here on this call is that we've seen people, the dynamics of how people make their payments and pay their bills. We used to see peaks of traffic around 9 o'clock in the morning, midday, and then sort of 6, 7 o'clock at night, because that was when people were getting into the office, having their lunch, or doing their bill payments just before they sat down to have their tea and watch the telly. We're now seeing bill payments done, typically around 7 a.m. in the morning, and then we see them sort of 5, 6 o'clock at night. And people are doing them as they travel on the train while they're commuting into work, and the patterns have changed massively. So I think mobile banking is the biggest significant change I've seen in the last 5 years. But I would just also add, we've seen that change from people using it to pay salaries, which we never expected would happen, particularly in the hospitality industry and the building industry. It's great from that perspective, because you can make the payment, you can get the work from someone for the 5 days, and then you pay them, just before they clock off on the Friday afternoon. So I think, real-time payments, faster payments are making a huge difference, and we're seeing different use cases, every day here in the UK. And the one thing that I will like to see going forward, and I expect to happen, is the globalization of real-time payments. So, we have SWIFT, we have payments today that go globally. We don't have real-time payments, and I think that's the next big thing from a real-time payment perspective.
It's a great perspective. Katrina, last word on this one to you.
Thanks, Dave. We feel like a little toddler compared to Simon in the UK. So we've only been live for just over 3 years with real-time payments here in Australia. I mean, certainly from a retail banking customer perspective, it's just become the new normal in terms of basically all payments are just happening in real time, and customers are expecting that when they are making a payment, to the point when actually when it, for some reason, if it doesn't go through real time, they get quite annoyed about that. So, you know, the adoption has been fantastic. I think we're starting to see a really interesting range of different use cases as well, similar to what Simon articulated in the UK. So not only are we seeing strong use by the government, so our equivalent of the kind of welfare agencies using the MPP for real-time emergency payments to people at times of disaster, such as when there's floods and bushfires, and being able to actually get money into people's hands immediately when they really need it is one of the most powerful use cases of real-time payments, I think. But we're also seeing the use of real-time payments in a business sense as well. Increasingly, businesses are using the MPP here in Australia to accept payments from their customers, which we didn't necessarily expect to see happen so quickly. We're seeing things like on-demand pay, similar to what Simon said in the UK, where people are actually being able to access their salary before payday, but they've actually earned their wage and they want to be able to access those funds. And what that can mean to people in terms of the impact that can have to their lives, you know, I think is quite phenomenal. We're also starting to see even things like the use of blockchain together with the MPP, so the use of smart contracts. We're seeing the platform being used for on-ramps for cryptocurrency. We're seeing the greater use of fintech's use of the platform as well. And I think also from a business perspective, we're seeing third parties put together the power of real-time payments with what you can do around workflow animation and basically process efficiency, which makes it so powerful from a business perspective as well. And I think that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's going to come, particularly for us here in Australia when we do actually have some form of request to pay type of capability. So, you know, I think we're only just getting started.
Thank you for that, Katrina. It's quite really music to my ears as we're sort of, as Dan and I both mentioned, sort of early in the stages of real-time payments here in Canada, to hear the sheer number of potential use cases that are being considered in both Australia and the UK. Simon, my next question is for you, and this is where I really want to start drilling down into request to pay. So can you give us a sense of what the effect of request to pay has made on real-time payments in your market specifically?
Really interesting question, Dave. From our perspective, the way we've developed request to pay in the United Kingdom, we started out on the journey of making it relevant to real-time payments. So ultimately, the receiver of the request, i.e. the payer, would be driven down the route to pay the bill using our real-time payment proposition, faster payments. But it became quite apparent early on in the early days of the design of request to pay here in the UK that wasn't what the consumer wanted. And unlike previous projects that I've worked on in the payments industry, where you normally build the central infrastructure and then get people to plug into it, we decided to do something different here in the UK, and we decided to research exactly what the consumer wanted from a request to pay proposition. And then we decided, well, if we're asking the consumer, why don't we ask the corporate, and why don't we ask the government, and why don't we became, let's do it and go and talk to them and find out exactly what it is they want. And what they wanted from a consumer perspective was flexibility and control. And what they wanted from a corporate and a business perspective was the ability for reconciliation to be really simple. So for the request to pay to carry the reference data that would allow that to happen. So in the UK, we're just in the throes of, as I say, we're a year in, but we're still, breaking that ground as we get more and more organisations coming on board. But what we did here in the UK is make the proposition payment agnostic. So we allow payments to be made via your debit, your credit card, PayPal, faster payments, and you name it, you can make the payment using our request to pay proposition. And that's because we've developed it as a messaging service and not a payment service. And we also, finally, just to add to the last bit, we also wanted to make it as safe and secure as we possibly could, because that was key both to the biller and the payer. They wanted to know where the request had come from and that it had come from a bona fide source, and they wanted to know that they could check that and make sure it was okay. And they also wanted then the ability to not have to input relevant information, but that to be automatically carried into whatever payment, whether that was a card, PayPal, or faster payments. So that's what we've developed here in the UK. I believe it's unique. I'm not seeing anything like it around the world, but again, I would say I think it's the right way for us to go. I think it's the right way for Request to Pay, because it opens up a whole load of other potential use cases for Request to Pay because it's a messaging service.
That's really helpful, Simon. Thank you so much. Katrina, I know Australia is scheduled to go live next year, but I'm wondering if you could share your views on what impacts you expect or anticipate from Request to Pay.
Sure, Dave. And we're actually really excited about what we think the Request to Pay capability is going to bring for us here in Australia, because we think it will open up a whole different range of use cases. So we actually started about 4 years ago thinking about this capability, and we actually started from somewhere slightly different from maybe kind of where the UK came from. Was we started from the premise of actually looking at a better alternative to direct debit payments in terms of how do we move those payments over to the real-time payments infrastructure. But what we kind of found in that journey, as we kind of, similar to what Simon articulated in the UK, when we actually kind of looked at what customers might want to use it for, but also businesses and fintechs and corporates and even the government, we found that it was really kind of broad capability to either enable a biller or a merchant or a fintech to be able to request a payment to their account, but also actually for organisations that can perform on behalf of type services for businesses as well. So like say for corporates to do their payroll run or to do their pension payments or their tax payments or e-invoicing, which is getting quite a bit of traction here in Australia, and actually being able to authorise a third party to be able to push payments out from their account with their authorisation. And what we've done here in Australia is we've actually kind of combined that sort of Request to Pay message capability with the authorization piece from a customer perspective. And so as a customer, I can provide my authorization for a transaction that might be for a one-off payment. It might be for recurring payments or frequent payments. So actually, I could set up what we call a payment agreement here, and I could use my bank account to fund my payments. So like a kind of account on file type of concept. So if I shop at Amazon for regularly, I can just use that as my preferred payment method. And I basically provide my authorization once and I set that up. And that can be within certain parameters that I have visibility to and I have control over. And then I can just use that as a way to make payments from my account. I could use it to fund other payment sources as well. So I could use it to fund my PayPal wallet, or I can use it to fund Buy Now, Pay Later, which is getting a lot of popularity here in Australia. And so we really tried to make it broad capability that could be used for a whole different range of use cases. It could be used to pay for my Netflix subscription, which today maybe I can only use credit cards. So our intention was to try and build it once, but actually be able to utilize it and make it flexible enough for a range of different use cases. I mean, similar to what Simon articulated, certainly from a business perspective, what we found is that businesses are really interested in the fact that they can get real-time information together with the capability. So I can get real-time confirmation of payments been successful. I can get the reconciliation data that I need to be able to do that efficiently. And given that our messaging is built on the ISO 20022, we've got lots of data fields to play around with from a data perspective as well. So that gives it such kind of really rich capability that I think it'll end up being used in a whole different range of use cases that we've thought of. So, you know, we've got our kind of list of about 10 or 12, and they're the obvious ones, but what different organizations are going to be able to do with it. And I think particularly for some of the more innovative kind of fintechs, you know, it's going to be sort of really, really interesting to see.
Such great perspectives. I really like the focus you've both put on research and end user needs and you know, opening up this space for others to build on top of the underlying capability. Dan, given your role as a former board member, I'm wondering, what do you think the effect could be here in Canada, and what advice might you have for Payments Canada as we look to build up this capability?
Yeah, I think what you've heard from Simon and Katrina is we don't know yet. I mean, it's we're just scratching the surface probably, and certainly Simon's further on the journey. Katrina mentioned that they're a toddler. I don't know what that makes us exactly, but we're so early in this. I'm seeing so much potential now, and it's like any utility. I've used this example with open banking before, but if I were to walk out on the street and ask people how much they care about and are excited about alternating current, no one's going to care, even if they know what it is. If I say, how much do you want to be able to plug in your fridge and keep your food cold and heat your house and watch television, they care quite a bit. So no one cares about the utility, but they care about the use cases in the end of it. So, before I joined Equitable, I worked at Bank of Montreal for years. And I remember the CEO, Bill Down, telling me once, you make it easy. I used to run online banking there. And he said, you make it easy to pay my bill, but you don't make it really easy for me to know how much I owe or when or what my minimum payment is. And I thought, yeah, that's true. I mean, it's a very disconnected experience. You've got a merchant sending a bill, and you have to remember the amount or the minimum amount if that's what you want to pay. You have to remember the due date if you want to, really maximize your time value of money, which bank CEOs like to do, I'm told. And so, you have to remember all that and then move over to a mobile app or a banking site and put everything in and hit submit. And if you kind of took the friction out of that and actually just had the merchant kind of had, a very simple instruction, you kind of click here and it takes you to a request to pay, and all that is pre-filled and it's very, very simple to do. I think that's better for the consumer. I think it's better for the merchant, probably less chasing people around for putting in the wrong amounts or who forget the dates. So there's even just that simple use case that we can all picture now, I think you can see some of the friction coming out. So, this idea of it becoming a utility on which, paytechs can build, fintechs can jump on, the use cases will come out that will seem blindingly obvious a couple of years after they come out. So, I think we'll do the typical Canadian thing and we'll watch the UK and see what they do, and we'll watch Australia and see what they do, and may or may not wait around for other Commonwealth countries and see what they do and then copy. But I think, I'm excited about where it can go and the potential, that it does carry. And that really was all the discussion. And not to harken back too much, I've been off the board for a while, but I can tell you that was always the discussion of what value can we unlock? Where can we open things up to make, the competition better, or really it was about life better for the average Canadian and, the small business owner. And at a time when we have small business owners suffering so much from the effects of COVID, anytime we can unlock value for them. So if you think about the payments value chain they're facing today, and things that you could do that request to pay start to unlock and actually start to disrupt very closely guarded chunks of that value chain, the fees that they're paying, sort of the margin that's coming off. If you start to actually enable them to hold on to more of that or free up more of that value, that economic value does go somewhere, but probably out of the hands of some of the incumbents. And I think as a challenger, that's exciting for me. But I think it should be exciting for just about the whole ecosystem. So I'm, suffice it to say, I'm very excited about this whole thing.
Yeah. No,
maybe if I could jump into what Dan just said there, I think certainly one of the things that's come out really strongly for us here in Australia is that concept from a customer perspective of visibility and control. So if I can actually see the various payment agreements that I might have set up because they're recurring and ongoing, and I can know when those payments are coming out for how much, and I can also potentially move them to a different financial institution, or I can potentially, we've got the capability here in Australia to be able to pause those agreements and cancel them much more easily than I can today. It's such a powerful concept from a customer perspective in terms of how I then feel that I'm really in control about what's happening as it relates to my financial situation and my bank account and my payments. And I think, you can't kind of underestimate actually from a customer perspective how much that resonates. Certainly, when we tested that here in Australia, people are like, this is fantastic. When's it coming? So, which is quite unusual with payments for people to get so excited, I think. So.
No, it's a great perspective, Katrina. And I really like the focus on solving problems, right? And sometimes they're not necessarily apparent, but when you dig a bit under the covers, it doesn't take too many clicks before we actually find out what's actually broken with things like bill payment. particularly when you focus on the user experience or the biller experience. It doesn't take us too long. Simon, the next question is really for you, and given sort of your experience and where you're at in your journey, I'd ask you to kind of reflect and remember a specific experience perhaps where you wish Pay UK had done something differently when implementing Request to Pay. And if you were to do it over again, what might you change?
Okay, interesting question. I'd just like to build on what Katrina and Dan said, you know, in the answers to the previous questions. In that, I think the fact that COVID has come along and, you know, changed all of our lives, Request to Pay, if it had been available, I think would have made a massive difference, because, you know, we're not allowed to touch things, you know, bills that come through the post, paying things, you know, Request to Pay would have been massively useful as a tool during COVID. So, you know, I wish we were 3 years ahead of where we are now, so that it was available and we could use it. And, you know, I think it's going to become a global proposition as well. So I think, you know, requests will start traveling around the world, which will, again, given what circumstances we're in at the moment, will make a huge difference. So just re-echoing what they've said, which I totally agree with. I think Request to Pay needs to be controlled. It needs to have the flexibility, but it also needs to demonstrate to people that they can see their bills and they have that financial control over what they're doing. And that was one of the goals that we set out. But to get back to your question, Dave, I think on the whole, we built the Request to Pay proposition in the way we wanted to, because of what I talked about in the answer to the first question, which was we did the research. So enabling me to demonstrate to my bosses, look, we've got the information here that says this is how we should build it. But to drill a bit deeper into into the question that you've asked and try and give you an answer. The way the Request to Pay proposition is set up in the UK, you need the equivalent of a sort of email address. So there's a Request to Pay address. And that is proving quite a sort of a pain point for us to get people to engage in the service, because it's like, oh no, I've got to have another address, or I've got to have something else that I need to give the biller. So if I had my time over again, I would have built within the platform, and we've got a very thin platform as the central infrastructure element, but I would have built in the ability to have a proxy, so whereby I could have linked this address to my mobile phone number, for example, or to my email address, or talking to government, you know, taxation here in the UK, say your road tax, we could link the Request to Pay address to your license plate, which would then make your road tax so simple. So if I had my time over again, I would have asked for the capability for us to add a proxy, which I think would make for consumers joining the service a lot simpler. We've actually recognized that, and we're looking to see if we can build something, but there's an element of after the horse, you know, putting the cart after the horse. So for me, that would have been the big thing. And the other thing, which is not Pay.UK, but I would have loved for, and this may still happen, I don't know, but I would have loved for the government here in the UK or our regulators to make it mandatory for banks to offer this to their customers. So that would be my advice to you guys in Canada. Get your government or your regulators to make it mandatory, because it makes the journey so much easier. Yeah, the banks don't like it, but in my opinion, it's the best way to go. So hopefully that answers your question, Dave. Most of it was all good. We did the research and we got the right results, but proxy would be the one thing I would ask for if I had my time over again.
No, it's. I feel very fortunate to have such a distinguished group of people to talk to. It helps us when we're thinking about what we might do in Canada to kind of look around the corners, and sometimes looking backwards is the best way to help anticipate future problems. So, Katrina, again, with about a year to launch, I'm wondering any lessons learned to share with Canada.
You might need to ask me that question in about 2 years, Dave. Although I think actually I'm really heartened by actually Simon's response, because I think actually in those two areas we have catered for those areas up front. So from a proxy perspective, we're actually building into the design that a customer can use both their bank account details, you know, the BSB or sort code number that we have here in Australia, and their account number to set up that a payment agreement. But they could also use Pay ID, which is our version of proxy addressing, and they can connect their payment agreements to that, so that again it's also easier for them to move to different financial institutions. From a customer perspective, it provides that kind of portability as well. So hopefully we've got that covered. And we also specifically actually from a market identity perspective, because we have branded this capability with a market-facing name, which is Pay2. We've actually consciously kind of connected that with our proxy addressing service with Pay ID to actually kind of make it seem like it's coming from the same kind of family as well. So hopefully from a customer perspective, that will kind of make people kind of make that connection as well. So hopefully we've got that one covered, Simon. I'll let you know in a couple of years how that goes. And the second one, actually, I think around the point around the mandatory kind of implementation piece, I think is actually really important. So what we've done here in Australia is we've focused on what do we need to do to make sure that we've got the minimum network effect on the payer customer side. And so what do all of the banks and financial institutions that are participating in the platform need to make sure they can support, so that their payer customers can use this capability? Because unless you have that network effect, it's very hard for people who want to be able to utilize it on the kind of user side or the biller side or whoever they might be, to be able to do that unless they know that at least they can reach a critical mass of customers. So what we did here in Australia is our board actually mandated that our participating financial institutions have to build the minimum set of capability that they have to support on the payer customer side. So they have to be able to support their customers authorizing those agreements and those transactions, and they have to be able to provide the mechanism by which customers can view those arrangements and to kind of sort of maintain them as well. And certainly to Simon's point, it wasn't particularly popular, but it also kind of gave financial institutions the assurance that if they were going to invest in this capability and actually spend the time and the resources and the money to develop it and to build it out into their digital channels, which is not a small undertaking, that everybody else was going to be there as well. So I think that was really, really critical. And, you know, we had the support of the regulator in that process as well, in terms of with the development of our mandatory compliance framework. And the fact that we just had a regulatory review maybe about 6 months before we announced that probably helped. But it certainly has been really important to kind of bring everybody to the table, because you do really need to make sure that you've got enough kind of critical mass of organisations that are providing this capability. So I think that they're probably two areas that hopefully we've got covered off. I think just my other words of advice is probably from a design perspective is really making sure that you're actually catering for how this capability might be used, and make it really flexible enough and extendable to cater to a different range of use cases. Because the last thing you want to do once you've kind of gone through all the effort of building this capability is find that actually there's a set of things that you can't do that you wish you could have done, and now you've got to go back and start again. And I think it took us a little while on that journey to kind of sort of really realise that we had to really make sure that it was flexible and think about not just from a kind of a request to pay kind of perspective in terms of from the payee to the payer, but as I mentioned earlier, also thinking about actually there's going to be use cases that a payer might want to actually utilise as well, or fintechs or other third parties in other scenarios, and really making sure that it's flexible enough that you'll be able to extend the capability to those kind of future use cases. I think it's been really important. And it took us a little while and a few kind of iterations and going around through various options about how it might work, that, you know, if I could go back again, I'd probably fast forward some of that to get to the point where we are now.
Yeah, there's always the struggle, isn't it, right? Between being use case agnostic and being able to describe practical use cases so people can kind of get their heads around what exactly it is you're proposing to build, because it is not an insignificant cost and an effort to move an entire industry in a uniform and sort of standardized direction. Dan, I wonder, you know, from your perspective again, how might Canada apply some of these lessons?
Yeah, I think it's early to already be sort of having regrets about what we might have done or didn't do. But I think as we go through those processes, you watch the proverbial sausage be made. You're sort of always kind of making trade-offs as you go, right? You have to find the balance between this incredibly large implementation that's happening, very, very complicated with all these players, and we're also doing a couple of these at the same time, right? Which is a little bit atypical. So there's some things that, from a request to pay perspective, I would have liked to have seen a bit more prominent. I mean, maybe we should have made that a very, very explicit policy objective up front to say we could do this. Now, all the discussion about links and RTR, the two big projects, there are a ton of policy objectives right at the top of the list, and like everyone's working very hard to hit those, and all incredibly valuable. From my perspective, as someone who can stand on the outside now and say I would like to also have the following if I'm picking from a menu. Well, I'm being a bit cheeky there, but I mean, also, Alex from Paytex, wrote a really, really good article about this and made the point to say, yeah, I get it. There's a lot going on, but the marginal cost of, for trying to boil the ocean when the ocean's already boiling is pretty low. And so the value that you unlock from request to pay and making sure that everything you need is there and actually, having it right in the first instance, could be one of the real killer use cases, I think, for RTR. And I think the plan is to get there, but I don't know if we know when yet. And so, in a perfect world, if you can go back and suddenly just make everything a little bit easier, this would have been a great thing to add on. Everyone knows it wasn't easy and isn't easy. And we'll get there. I think it can't come soon enough, I think, for all the reasons that we've already articulated so well here. And it's been a similar discussion. We've been very close to the open banking discussions in the country as well. And again, those are very much in the discussion stage. But it looks like it's trending in a direction where, payment initiation, which is sort of the equivalent term, I guess, on the open banking side, probably won't sort of be in the first instance of whatever we're kind of thinking of. And not that anything's set in stone by any stretch, but it does feel like it's going that way. And I think, part of this is down to it will be very disruptive to a lot of nice, cozy little profit pools. And so, that to me is a reason to push on it, but you can understand where the resistance comes from. So I'm a big believer in, if you've got the hood of the car open, Simon, I guess that's a bonnet for you, I'm not sure, but if you've got the hood of the car open, and you're already doing all that tinkering, it doesn't seem like it's a huge effort to sort of, maybe do a couple more tweaks while you're there to kind of get this done right. So I'm not trying to minimize all the amount of work that's gone into this. God knows I'm seeing it from all angles and all the hard work that's gone into this. It's one of those things that everyone would have loved to have been maybe a little further along at this stage than where we are. So all we can do is cheer the work that's been done and celebrate that when it's live, and then get right back to work on now how do we add even more value on top. That's and I'll be the first right at the front of the line to do that.
Yeah, I think in addition to getting the RTR up and live in Canada with the functionality as described, I think having a clear product roadmap and vision for where we're going, I think, is equally important to answer your point isn't lost. Maybe I'll put the next question right back to you and ask if you could describe something you've seen or done or something you wish everybody was doing as it relates to request to pay.
I'm probably just going to point at Simon and say that, I guess. So I'd love to, we've got any number of examples that we can kind of point to around the world. And as I said, it's a little hard to put your finger on what they might be. So we're very much in the watching, almost the principles stage of this at this point. And, Simon made a good point about, thinking through things like proxy. I mean, we've luckily kind of done that on this side and actually fixed the reverse problem. But just thinking through, that balance and getting the balance right of the user experience and the business needs and safety and stability, which always comes up, especially in Canada. It's almost a bit of a wall around some things more than it should be. So I think from our standpoint, we're still looking less at very, very specific examples of here's a company that's done this or something, and more looking at the principles. And as I said, the Canadian want is to watch the other regions and see what they've done, and we like to say pick a best of breed kind of solution. I don't think we can actually say fast follower anymore at this point, but I think we're trying to pick the best of what we've seen from around the world and create that perfect mosaic. So that's not to cop out, but I think that's kind of the stage that we're at, but where we are.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, right? You do have the privilege of watching others go first, but sometimes that can also create inertia in terms of what you choose to go live with and what you introduce in subsequent releases.
For sure. And listen, like I said, I mean, I know there's a ton of work going on, but we've done an integration now with TransferWise, or what's now called Wise. And my CEO loves to point out that we can send money to India in 6 to 7 seconds. But for me to send money to Manitoba, it takes a couple of days still, usually, for the same amount. So while we all know the journey that we're on and why we're on it, I did that implementation in 3 months, and so it feels a little tough to kind of. I know it's national infrastructure. I'm not trying to compare the two. I'm just saying it creates a bit of it gives our contact center some tough questions to answer about why I can get money into my South African bank account in a matter of minutes, and I can't get it across one province over as quickly. So the sooner we can get those closed off, the better, obviously. And as I said, I know everyone's working very hard towards that.
No, fair point. Simon, anything to add? Something you wish everybody was doing as it relates to request to pay?
Everybody was doing. I think I would reiterate Dan or say to Dan, I've got the T-shirt, mate. I've been there, seen it, and lived what you're going through at the moment, and also lived in an organisation like HSBC where you could make a payment to Australia in seconds, but you couldn't make one down the road. So yeah, I've lived through, and we developed request to pay and faster payments on the backs of all of that. So what I would like to see going forward, I guess, is I see request to pay is going to become global. So Katrina made a really good point about the fact that Australia has bought into the case that their request to pay proposition is going to be ISO 20022. So that's fantastic, and that's right. And we've done exactly the same thing here in the UK. We future-proofed it for it being a global proposition, because I think it will be a global proposition. I think things like documentary credits lend themselves massively to a request to pay type scenario, a messaging type of scenario. You've got shed loads of paper going around the world with an airway bill or a bill of lading, when why can't we do that electronically? That's the sort of questions that I continually don't wake up at night, but wake up in the morning thinking request to pay is the answer to that one, or it's not. And I think there will become a time when point of sale utilizes the request to pay technology that we've got, where you can actually walk into a shop and not have to go to a till. You just pick up the goods, show it to your mobile phone, and walk out again. That is coming. And I also think, if we're going down that road, then let's go a bit further, where your fridge talks to your house and says, actually, you're out of milk. And that's a message goes to your supermarket. I think they're called supermarkets around the world. And you actually then get the milk delivered. So that is coming. And I think request to pay will open up that revolution massively throughout the world. And I know, having talked to the people in Australia and yourselves in Canada and America, it's coming. We just got to get it grounded in each of our countries, and then we'll be able to talk to one another. And the fact that you're getting real-time payments in Canada is only going to open up that market even bigger and wider. There's questions that need to be answered. How will settlement take place? Where is settlement going to take place? What is actually the value of the payment? But, if we're doing it all real time, who cares? The clock is 24 hours, so it doesn't really matter in my mind. They just seem to me that they're obstacles that are put in front of us, but actually they're obstacles that are quite easily that we can get over, because we've got the capability now. We've got APIs that have been developed. Who knows what's around the corner in the scope of technology? I have no idea, but what I've tried to do is build the request to pay in the UK so that we can open it up to any new potential technological advancements throughout the world, and to open request to pay to the world, which I think will happen, because we're a global economy effectively. And if COVID has shown us anything, we rely on one another massively, much more than we ever thought we did. And we've got to help those developing countries as well. And I think request to pay is one of those things that can massively help. And COVID, horrible thing, but it's demonstrated quite a lot of things where human ingenuity is amazing, and so I think that the sky's the limit in what we can do with this. And it's probably coming across, sorry, but I'm really excited about it. I think we're on the cusp of something amazing. It feels like, the invention of the internet. I think request to pay could be that big. I honestly believe that, because I think it could change the way we do trade, the way we do everything. I'll stop there.
No, thank you, Simon. I mean, it really is, encouraging to see such enthusiasm for request to pay. I know some of us feel that way here also. Katrina, I wonder if you have any last words or last thoughts on this question. Is there anything you wish everybody was doing as it relates to request to pay?
Yeah, not much to add to that, really, Dave. I mean, I think it is a bit probably early, I think, in terms of kind of what I wish everyone was doing. I echo Simon's thoughts there. We certainly see it as revolutionary here in Australia. I mean, we just are so excited by what we think this capability is going to be able to do, and not just from a customer perspective, but I think also in the business world. I think that we're only just scratching the surface in terms of what the capability is going to be able to do as it relates to B2B payments, and actually the potential to really create some real process efficiencies and benefits for organizations. I think once we actually see some of that start to play out, I think that's going to be huge. And I think that's really exciting to kind of just see how some of that can be completely transformed. And I think, certainly what we're seeing here in Australia, I think there's going to be a role played by a set of intermediaries or kind of third parties that are providing that interface between kind of business and the payment system that I think is going to be so critical. And I kind of, to some extent, wish maybe that some of the financial institutions were doing a bit more of what some of those types of organisations were doing, because some of what they're doing with APIs and their service offerings is just really exciting, and it is really transformational. And so, I think if we could clone some of those, I think that would be great. But it's just we're just only getting started. So, I kind of want to push the fast forward button to get to that point in time, because like when you've been kind of sort of working on something for so long, you just kind of really want it to come to fruition and start to kind of see it in actual practice and see it being used and kind of see the difference it's going to make to people's lives, because I think it really will be quite significant.
Sorry, David, I would just echo that, Katrina. And when you get there, it's an amazing moment. So, keep in touch, please. And I look forward to you joining the Request to Pay revolution in a year's time. And Canada, to Dan's point, get there as quickly as you possibly can, because it's revolutionary. And it's quite the journey, isn't it, Katrina? It's a good journey.
It is. But yes, you kind of want to get to the end of the journey too, right? So you can kind of move on to the next stage. But
when you get there, Katrina, there's all the other things that then come about. Critical mass. Why isn't that happening? But the journey's great, so you enjoy it.
Folks, this has been great. We're
worked out, but
we have just a few minutes left, so I just want to ask any one of our three sort of distinguished colleagues here today, any last parting comments for us, maybe in 30 to 60 seconds. Anything that we've missed, left out, or needs to be addressed on this topic?
I don't think it's anything we've missed. I just think, to reiterate what Katrina was saying, this is revolutionary, and it can make a huge benefit. I think we get lost in what benefits it can make to the consumer, but Katrina made a really good point. There are massive benefits to the businesses, and I also think there are massive benefits to banks that they haven't actually realised yet, particularly the old school banks, and we've got lots of them in the UK, I can assure you of that. The fintech type banks in the UK are starting to show a clean pair of heels in this space. So I would say to the Canadians, just watch that and make sure you can bring everyone with you, because that's quite important. And I think love it if we could get the momentum behind it. It just needs. We're just getting over the hump now, but it's a journey that we've been on, and it's really important that we know what it does for a consumer, but there's other bits that it actually does benefit the businesses. So that would be my lasting point to make.
Yeah, I think certainly to echo what Simon was saying from a financial institution perspective, I mean, certainly here in Australia, a lot of our banks are really supportive of the capability because they see that as providing an opportunity to then actually shut down the old legacy system. So it's like move everything across, and when you can do that, then you can shut that down. They can simplify their environments and their infrastructure. They can, reduce some of the kind of large teams of people that are today are having to, do all that exception processing, which you kind of forget about, I think, in terms of actually what that can mean from a cost perspective. And that really is a kind of significant area of opportunity that they are really seeing as well. So, I think it's really important to understand, how does everybody win in this? Because I think everybody does.
Yeah, and Dave, wherever Dave's gone, I'll just jump in and I think, kind of building on some of the comments that have come up actually, from Simon and Katrina about, we tend to think of the future of the Canadian digital, almost national infrastructure in three parts. There's the payments modernization, there's digital ID, and there's open banking. And we see this as a Venn diagram. And the intersection of payments modernization and open banking is what, request to pay or payment initiation. I kind of see those a bit of a piece. And so I think about how much different COVID would have been. I think if we had, the ability to get, listen, Payments Canada and the banks did an enormous amount of work to get these support payments out to people, but it was an enormous amount of heavy lifting to do that. And so if, some of these, more efficient methods in place to get these things out more quickly were there, more people would have benefited from that. I think digital ID would have supported, the vaccine rollouts. I think about the load that we're putting on the frontline healthcare workers and administrators in trying to now manage that, short of having sort of a very fixed scheme, right? That's built on the back of a digital ID scheme. And open banking in terms of people understanding their finances and being in better control and at a time that's very trying. So it would have been amazing to have all those in place. And I know it's easy to go back and look at that, but it just makes you really pine for sort of a world where one or more of those things are in place when this crisis hit us. So that's what I leave with. I just the faster we do this, the better. There's always something else down the road, and we should really make sure that the national infrastructure is ready.
Great. Folks, thanks so much. I'm sorry I had a small technical issue there at the end, but thank you, Dan, very much for closing. This session has been pre-recorded to accommodate our speakers from Australia, from UK, here in Canada. So my sincere thanks to our presenters, Dan, Katrina, Simon. I really do appreciate it. If there are any questions, folks may submit them to the Summit's networking platform on the website or reach out to any of our speakers. If you found this interesting, there are other sessions around Request to Pay. I'd ask you to check out Biller Perspectives on Real-Time Payments, which follows this session on Tuesday, June the 1st at 12. Other than that, thank you very much for attending. I do hope you found this session entertaining. Take care and stay safe.